Hey guys, in this video today I'm going to show you how I made this bucket for a competition for Daniel Craft. It was just I just tried to make a realistic Halloween render, and yeah, so I started off with some reference imaging. So I was looking on the internet, and I knew I wanted to do some candy, like some candy in a bowl, in a bucket. So I started off with some candy corn, so I'm just modeling those now. So I started off with a cube, and I'm just going into edit mode, wireframe to get the vertices. I'm just creating and scaling just the general shape because I'm going to put this in a subdivision surface modifier and it's going to smooth out those corners. So I'm just modeling that pretty quickly, and then I'm just shaping it. Yeah, so I'm just adding a subdivision surface modifier now. I'm setting it to 2, and it's going to get the general shape. At the moment now, I'm just going to add some edge loops. So Control R gives me that control, and it's just going to tighten up some of those edges. I just do this until I get the general shape of it. Yeah, so once I finished the shape, I just went into shadowing mode and just started to put materials on it. So I created a new texture, just called it candy corn. And I'm just going to use an image texture in this because it's quite easy. So I'm just going to be a cycles render, so I just change it to cycles and just change some settings for it. I'm making the background transparent and adding an HDRI just so I can see pretty easy. So the way I do that, I just go into the world view and I select environment texture, and then I just open up a texture. You can get these from HDRI Haven, they're all free, and it's just a good way to get realistic lighting without having to put specific lights. It's a great way to get realism in the render without trying too much. So I just added the studio texture, and now I have that cycles ready. And yeah, so the texture I used is just one I've got off the internet. I press Control T, and I'm just opening up this texture. It was just simple. I'm gonna put this in the description, so if you want to follow along, you can use it. And so now I'm going into UV editing mode because I need the correct maps. Yeah, so I'm just selecting all the things with A, and I'm going to scale them up to get it. So to get the correct scale, because I know I need, yeah, why wouldn't you have correct candy corn? So then I'm going into just EV mode now to see the results. I noticed that the top and bottom are a bit scuffed, and that's where the UV maps are. So I'm pressing L for linked selection, so it's selecting those linked objects specifically, and I know it's white, so I'm just going to scale it down till it fits. Doesn't really matter the size. I notice the bottom one's a bit off as well, so I'm just going to fix that. Yeah, so once I get the textures on, I want to do a dirty bump map just to make it a little bit better. So I copy the selections. So I copy these selections and I'll make a duplicate so it's different, and I'll turn it to non-color. I run that through a normal map, which will change it. Yeah, run it through a normal map and then also a bump map. So I put into strength and then through a bump map, and they'll just create a dirty bump map from the texture, and that will create fake bump for the candy corn. Yeah, and so just quickly here, I was playing around with the transmission. That's just the amount of light that can pass through it. So I just gave it a little amount because I know gummies, gummies have some light pass through, and I do the same technique with the gummy bears. So I changed that to about, it's 0.6 or so, I think, not 0.2. Yep, and then I also turn up the subdivision surface to have light, which is it's light that passes through an object. So yeah, just a bit of that, and then just give it a nice gummy look. I also didn't like the colors; they looked a bit sad. So I added a hue saturation node, and I just bumped up the saturation until it looked right. At this moment, I just went into sculpt mode and just did some sculpting, just give it some variance in its look. So the next object I'm going to do is a gummy worm. So I just got some reference images off the internet, and I just imported that in. So with the reference images, it's good just to get a general idea of what it's going to look like. So I knew I was going to sculpt with this, and the general shape is a cube with a subdivision surface on it. So I just started that, and I actually made the shape with the curve, which I'll show you later. So I extruded it out to about the length I knew I wanted, added a subdivision surface modifier, and added some edge loops, Control R, to just give it some more shape. Yep, so now I add some edge loops for some vertices because I'm going to bend this mesh around a curve object. So I started with a Bezier curve because that's the closest looking to a gummy, like especially a gummy snake already. And so I'm just scaling that up to the size I wanted, and then I know I have to put the origin at the start. So what I'll do there, I'll press the selected point, I'll press Shift A, cursor to origin, and then I'll right click it, origin to cursor, and then the origin goes to the starting point of the thing. I'll add a curve modifier to the object, and I'll select the curve, and then you can see the gummy has rotated. So I'm just moving it down to get better to the shape. Yep, so I just applied the modifier to get the geometry of it, and now I'm going to go into sculpting. So it already has a pretty high density mesh, so I don't have to remesh this. I'm going to go into the carve tool, the crease tool, scaling it with F. F changes the scale of it, and right click and change the strength and all that. So all I'm doing now is creating those little divots. So I'm just testing which ones are right, and I'm just slowly putting in those divots, and just, yeah, with any brush you can press the shift button and it automatically goes smooth, and with the control it does the opposite of the function. It's crease, it would extrude it. So it's just a quick little tip, and just get the streamline the workflow a bit more. Once I finish the modeling of the thing, I run it through a gradient map and a color ramp. So this is just an easy way to get the gummy texture. And the color ramp is just, it's a gradient. It's a gradient. So I'm just playing with these functions now. I initially added 3, but then I just went back down to 2. And so you just change the colors of the gradient to get the different colors of the gummy worm. And I also increased the transmission value pretty close to 1, and it just gave it that very gummy look. It's great. That's what you need. The next object I started on was the chocolates. So I just started off with Sphere. Yeah, so UV sphere, I just scaled it up to about the size. And this is pretty easy actually, because I'm just going to use the textures off these images, which gives me realism. Like, I don't have to make my own textures, just steal them. That's life's motto, but yeah. Yeah, so just using the same method, I just Control T, made a new texture, and then I just plugged in what it was before. So I go into UV editing, and I knew I needed a perfect shape, so I go UV project from view, especially from front angle, and it just creates a view from where you need it. So I'm just selecting those vertices, pressing A, and I'm just dragging it over to where I'd like it. I ended up using a different texture because this was actually quite low quality, but it was the exact same principle. And it was the exact same principle for the eyeball. So I created a new texture, added a new image, and I just went to UV editing, just dragged around the maps. So you can see here, I just found the center eyeball, I just dragged it straight over there, and I got a perfect match. The next section was going to make the bucket. So it's pretty simple as well. We use proportional editing, and I was struggling for a long time. I tried to make those little dents in there using Boolean modifiers, but it killed me. I couldn't do it. So I ended up using bub maps, which you'll see is that's actually the better way to do it. And I just take the texture of this, so it's a lot easier. So what I'm doing, I'm using proportionality. I select the top vertice, I'm just bringing it down. And I'm just using, I'll select the vertices, proportionality, and just drag it out. And what I noticed there, it didn't work, so I'm just going to scale the entire object to fit the bounds, and then I'll scale it down, so just making it flatter, and just scaling the top in. So I got rid of the vertices on the top where the holes meet. It's creating a little loop there for me. Proportionality. The hotkey for that is O, in case you need it. And yeah, so at this moment I'm going to make the little indents. So what I'm going to do here now, I'm going to select every second or third vertice, and then we use proportionality. So I'll just skip ahead through. Yeah, so as you can see, I selected every fourth vertex, and I'm just scaling it, and now I'm pressing Shift Z to limit the Z axis so it won't scale, just pulling it in more. It's creating those little grooves. I'll just subdivision surface modify later just to smooth it out more, but generally that's the shape of it. That's all we need. And to create the shape of the handle, that's pretty simple. I just got a cube. I knew I was going to use a mirror modifier just so I don't eliminate half the work. So I'm getting rid of half these vertices. I'm just scaling them out. So pressing the x-axis and just control clicking. So control right click actually brings down the vertices automatically to where your point is. You can see I almost have a perfect line already. And what I'm using now, I'm going to scale out because I see at the edge there it's actually it's oval shaped. So I'm using some proportional editing, and I'll just drag out these edges. You can see there, just scale it along the y-axis using proportionality, and it'll bring the others with it, just like that. Yep, so I just add a subdivision surface modifier, add some edge loops. I added one there and I beveled it, so it just creates some closer to the center. And I'm just adding some supporting loops to give it some more shape, scaling it out more, just how I like it. So just continuing the steps we've done before, Control T, just add the texture I wanted, and just the same skills we're using. So we'll go to UV editing and we'll project the thing from the front view. So 1 to get in that, number pad 1, and we'll just scale it up till we get the correct dimensions. It's easy as that, and then it's basically, it looks great already. It's basically perfect. Yeah, and so we're just copying the steps we did before. So we're just duplicating it, creating a new link, and we're setting the bump map. So a normal map first, and then a bump map. So that goes into the color, and then a normal map. So that goes into the height, and that goes into the normal. And then we created those fake bumps, so you can see there. So we're reducing the strength just to get it very subtle, but it is there. And you can see that it's really made it look realistic. Just turn off overlays, just to make it easy to see. But yeah, so that's almost completed thing. The way I created the plastic tip is actually quite easy. So I named it, created a black texture, and I turned the specular down, I think. So specular is how much reflectiveness it has. And so the further down it gets, the less reflective, and that's more plastic-like. So I just turn it down to below the point. Yeah, so I just do the same with these little nubs here. And that's the plastic, and that is the bucket finished. So as you see me now, I'm just creating the scene for it. So I added a plane, and I actually select position camera view, which just lets you rotate the camera pretty easily by yourself. So I'm setting up the scene. I changed the dimensions to 1080 by 1080 because it's quite small. the entire, like the bucket and the entire render itself. So I'm just playing around with the camera, getting the angles I like. And I set it on this perspective. And so now I'm about to start filling it with. So to create the chocolates and lollies inside the bucket, I use physics simulations to get the random variation. So starting off, I'm making a passive object for the bucket, so what it can fall into. So I'll go to rigid body, passive, and press mesh, so it can actually fall inside the hole I was given. And so like the chocolates, I'll press rigid body active, sphere, and I'll do that with the same one. So now if I press play, they'll just fall inside the bucket and they'll stay there, roll around a little bit, it's fine. So I started with I added a cube because you're not going to see it, and I don't want to fill up the scene with a bunch of unnecessary vertices that you won't even be able to see because it's covered by the bucket. So I filled it up with a cube, just so the boars are the chocolates. The chocolates fall on top. So I just gave that the same passive object. So now as they fall, they land on the cube instead of the bottom. And so then I just get to duplicating. So I just duplicate these objects, just carrying them along, just making different variations. And then so as I do that, they're all going to fall in and settle down. So just give it a second, wait for it, and I'll pause it. And that's that's about the variation I want. It's physics, so it's real, which is it's even the better part. Great. So once you finish the thing, so you have to press F3, which goes into there, and you press apply transformation. So once you do that, the object will stop moving. So you just apply the transformation and they stop moving, or the first keyframe becomes where the last ones happen. But they still have the rigid body animation. That's why they fall when you press play. So you'll select them all again, and you'll search for remove rigid body animation. You select that, and now when you press play, they won't move and they're in a static position. And then you can start on the second object, which for us is the candy corn. So we just do the same process with the candy corn, and then we move on to the gummy bears. So with the gummy worms, I decided that I didn't want to do physics animation just because the mesh is terrible. Like it's very high poly, and physics animations, especially with a lot of objects, it will just slow my computer down. So I decided to place these individually instead. So I just applied the modifier so I could get rid of that curve, and then so I just scaled it down and just placed them in position I wanted. So I pressed right click origin geometry just to make it easier fit. I scaled it accordingly just so it looks about the right size, and I just place them. So just Control D to duplicate them, R to rotate, and I just move them around the scene accordingly. And I did the basic same thing. I created a rigid body animation for the chocolates and the candy canes, the candy corn, and just dropped them down until it felt right. And then so that led me with a bunch, just a mess of just lollies on the ground. And yeah, so it felt pretty good, but it didn't feel like there was enough. So later on, I go to duplicate a lot of the rest of the scene, and just fill it out, make it look a bit better. And so what I'm doing here, there's an add-on called Blend Kit. You just go into preferences and just add it as you go into it. You just have to activate it. It has a bunch of free materials and wood textures, free materials and models that you can use, and I use this for a texture of the ground. So I just go and collect wood, and I just drag it to the place. I go into shading, and I'm just scaling it to the size that I feel is about right. I change this later to a marble, but this is just to get the general scale and the atmosphere of the scene, just get that started. So throughout this, I'm just doing the exact same things I've been doing before. So I placed the gummy bears, the gummy worms, did the candy corn, just did some placement around it, applied rigid body animations, and then I started duplicating them around. Once I got the basic layouts of the scene together, I wanted to have some depth of field because it was a shallow scene, so there would be some realistic depth of field. So I go in depth of field, focus object as the bucket, and I realized the f-stops have to be quite low. I go into Eevee to test this out before I go into cycles, but around 0.3, 0.2 works for an average scene. And you can just see the bucket's nice and focused, but the background's out of it. And now I'm just beginning to put more work into it, so just duplicating the lollies, changing the camera angle just so I don't have the background into it. And I'm just adding lollies to the foreground, just to add some more effect. So I ended up changing the floor to a marble using the same strategy. And yeah, I turn off overlays. This is the final render. So I rendered this with 250 samples at 1080 by 1080. I didn't do any post compositing, just I like the way it looked initially. So yeah, thank you for watching. It wasn't too hard in total. It was about 2 hours, but I had fun with it.